The scent of his favorite coffee, dark roast with a hint of vanilla, still clung to the kitchen air, a ghost of a morning that felt a lifetime ago. My fingers trembled as I traced the outline of the future home blueprint spread across the island, the one Julian and I had spent countless nights poring over, dreaming of sun-drenched mornings and quiet evenings in a house that was supposed to be ours. Just hours ago, I'd been buzzing with nervous excitement, a secret simmering behind my lips, ready to surprise him with the news that my loan application for the down payment had been approved. He was due back any minute from what he'd called a critical, last-minute client meeting out of town, and I'd even bought a bottle of that ridiculously expensive champagne he loved, chilling it just so. The silence in the apartment now was deafening, punctuated only by the frantic thumping of my own heart, a drumbeat of dread. It wasn't the kind of silence that precedes a joyful reunion, it was the heavy, suffocating quiet of something fundamentally broken. I remember the exact moment the first crack appeared, though I dismissed it then as a trick of the light, a figment of my overactive imagination. It was a Tuesday, late. Julian was supposedly working late at the office, a common occurrence in his high-stakes world of mergers and acquisitions. I'd been scrolling through old photos on my laptop, a nostalgic trip down memory lane, when a notification popped up on Julian's discarded tablet, lying face down on the coffee table. He usually kept it locked away, almost religiously, claiming it was full of sensitive client data. But this time, in his rush, he'd left it open. The notification was from a social media app one didn't recognize, a small, vibrant icon I'd never seen on his phone. Curiosity, a dangerous beast, nudged me. I picked it up, my thumb hovering over the screen. It was a message preview, just a few words, but enough to send a chill down my spine. Can't wait for our weekend away, my love. Chloe. My love? Chloe? He had a sister named Chloe, a perpetually ailing sister he visited often, the one who lived 3 states away and whose health always seemed to be the reason for his sudden, unexplained trips. But my love? That wasn't how you talked about a sister, not even one you were devoted to. My stomach clenched. I told myself it was a friend, a pet name, a misunderstanding. He'd explained before that Chloe was like a second mother to him, fiercely protective. But the unease, a tiny, insidious worm, had burrowed its way in. Julian, when he finally arrived home hours later, was effusive, exhausted, and utterly charming. He swept me into a hug, smelling faintly of airport coffee and something else, something floral and unfamiliar. "Rough day, Angel," he murmured into my hair, "but it's all worth it for you." I almost told him about the tablet, about the message, but the words caught in my throat. He looked so genuinely tired, so relieved to be home. What if I was just being paranoid? What if it was truly innocent? I didn't want to be the suspicious girlfriend, the one who couldn't trust. So I swallowed the question, forced a smile, and made him his favorite pasta. As he ate, recounting his grueling negotiations, I watched him, searching for a tell, a flicker of deceit in his eyes. There was nothing. Just the warm, familiar gaze of the man I loved, the man who had promised me a future. He even pulled out his phone, showing me a blurred photo of a spreadsheet, claiming it was evidence of his late-night work. See? Proof, he'd laughed, and I'd laughed with him, the knot in my stomach loosening, but not entirely disappearing. It was the first time I consciously chose to ignore an instinct, and it wouldn't be the last. Our story had started like a fairy tale, the kind you read about in novels, a whirlwind of serendipity and intense connection. We met at a mutual friend's art gallery opening. I was admiring a particularly abstract piece, lost in thought, when his voice, deep and resonant, cut through the chatter. "That one," he'd said, standing beside me, "it speaks volumes, doesn't it? Of hidden depths and unspoken truths." I'd turned, startled, to find Julian, all sharp lines and easy smiles, his eyes crinkling at the corners. He had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room, even in a crowded space. We talked for hours that night, about art, about life, about our dreams. He was a successful entrepreneur, self-made, with a captivating story of overcoming adversity. Orphaned young, he'd built his empire from nothing, driven by a desire to provide for his ailing sister, Chloe, who was his only family. His devotion to her was something I found incredibly endearing, a testament to his good heart. He was everything I thought I wanted: ambitious, kind, intelligent, and utterly devoted. Within weeks, we were inseparable. Dinners, weekend trips, late-night conversations that stretched into dawn. He moved into my apartment after 3 months, his few belongings fitting neatly into my already established life, a testament to his minimalist, no-fuss approach, or so I thought. He always said, "My real home is wherever you are, Alara." And I believed him. Every word. The red flags, in retrospect, were like faint whispers in a hurricane, easily drowned out by the roar of my own happiness. His phone was always face down, always on silent. He'd never leave it unattended, not even for a second. If I ever reached for it, even to check the time, he'd quickly intercept, a charming apology about client confidentiality on his lips. His business trips were frequent, often sprung on me last minute, always to places far away, always with vague explanations. Just a quick hop to Seattle for a potential acquisition, he'd say, or urgent meeting in Denver. Sorry, Angel, wish you could come. I'd pack his small, sleek travel bag, a pang of loneliness in my chest, but proud of his drive, his success. He'd call me every night, his voice thick with longing, making me feel cherished despite the distance. He'd send photos too, always of generic hotel rooms or cityscapes, never of people, never of specific events. "Can't risk any leaks, you know how it is," he'd explain, and I, naive and trusting, would nod, understanding. He had no family photos displayed, no childhood mementos, just a few framed certificates and awards. "I don't dwell on the past, Alara," he'd said once, a shadow crossing his face. "Only the future. Our future." And that future, I realized now, was a meticulously crafted illusion. The future home blueprint lay there, mocking me. It was a beautiful, modern design, all glass and clean lines, nestled in a quiet, tree-lined suburb. We'd picked out the fixtures, debated the color palette, even imagined where our future children would play. I'd poured my savings, my dreams, my very soul into this vision. And now, the champagne sat chilling, the loan approval email glowed on my laptop screen, and the man who was supposed to share this future was, I now suspected, living a completely different one. The Chloe message had been the first tremor, but it was a much larger earthquake that had just hit. It started with a forgotten email. Julian had used my laptop for something work-related a few days ago, and in his haste, hadn't logged out of his personal email. I'd stumbled upon it accidentally, looking for a recipe, and a subject line had caught my eye: Chloe's 40th birthday party RSVP. Chloe's 40th? But he'd told me his sister was only 32. And the sender was a name I didn't recognize, someone named Sarah Peterson. My heart had begun to pound. I clicked it open, a cold dread seeping into my bones. The email was an invitation, a digital card with photos of Chloe, a woman who looked nothing like the vague descriptions Julian had given me of his frail, pale, perpetually ill sister. This Chloe was vibrant, laughing, surrounded by what looked like a large, boisterous family. And in one photo, standing right beside her, arm around her waist, smiling broadly, was Julian. My Julian. But not just Julian. Julian with a wedding ring on his left hand. A wedding ring I had never, ever seen. The air left my lungs in a whoosh. My vision blurred. I scrolled frantically through the email, past the cheerful RSVP button and the gift registry link. To the bottom. There, in small print, were the names of the hosts, Chloe and Julian Miller. Miller. Not Hayes, his last name. My last name. The last name we were supposed to share. My mind reeled, trying to make sense of it. Julian Miller. Chloe Miller. His wife. Not his sister. Not his ailing, distant sister. His wife. The woman he had been visiting, the family emergencies he'd rushed to. The pieces of the puzzle, once scattered and confusing, were now snapping into place with brutal clarity, forming a picture of betrayal so vast, so meticulously constructed, it made me feel physically ill. The floral scent on his clothes after his trips. The vague excuses. The guarded phone. The lack of family photos. It wasn't just a secret, it was an entire parallel universe, a life he was leading with someone else, while weaving an elaborate tapestry of lies for me. The champagne bottle in the fridge seemed to mock me, its frosty surface reflecting my horrified face. The future home blueprint, once a symbol of hope, now felt like a cruel joke. I wanted to scream, to smash something, to curl into a ball and disappear. But a cold, sharp anger, a new, unfamiliar sensation, began to replace the initial shock. This wasn't just about heartbreak, this was about a profound violation, a deliberate, calculated deception that had stolen years of my life, my trust, my future. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was not how our story would end. Not for me. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, in the apartment that was supposed to be ours. My fingers, still trembling, hovered over the laptop trackpad, the email invitation for Chloe's 40th birthday party still glaring from the screen. Julian Miller. Chloe Miller. The names echoed in my head, a cruel, mocking refrain. My mind, usually so sharp and analytical, felt like a tangled mess of broken glass. How could I have been so blind? So utterly, completely fooled? Every memory, every shared laugh, every intimate moment, was now tainted, replayed through the lens of this horrifying revelation. Was any of it real? Did he ever truly love me, or was I just a convenient placeholder, a distraction, a secondary life he could dip into when his primary one was out of reach? The thought made me gag. I walked to the window, staring out at the familiar city skyline, the lights twinkling like indifferent eyes. The world outside seemed to continue on its oblivious way, while mine had just imploded. I felt a desperate urge to call Liam, my best friend, the one person who had always seen through my rose-tinted glasses, who had often, subtly, raised an eyebrow at Julian's more outlandish stories. But I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to breathe, to process, to find a way to articulate the enormity of this betrayal without dissolving into a puddle of tears. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces clicked into place, forming a grotesque mosaic of deceit. His constant vigilance over his phone? Not client confidentiality, but fear of a stray text from his real wife. His vague business trips? Not acquisitions, but visits to his real home, his real family. The floral scent on his clothes? Not airport air, but the lingering perfume of another woman. Even the way he'd introduced me to some of his acquaintances at that charity gala a few months ago, a quick, almost dismissive "this is Alara," followed by a swift change of subject. I'd brushed it off then, attributing it to his reserved nature in formal settings. Now, I saw it for what it was, a deliberate attempt to keep me at arm's length, to prevent any uncomfortable questions or accidental revelations. I remembered the odd look on one woman's face, a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher then, pity? Disapproval? Now, it was chillingly clear. She must have known. She must have known he was married. And she must have seen me, standing there, blissfully unaware, a fool in love. The humiliation, a hot wave, washed over me, burning my cheeks. My gaze fell on the small, framed photo on my bedside table, Julian and me, laughing, arms around each other, taken during our first weekend getaway. He looked so happy, so genuine. Was it all an act? A performance worthy of an Oscar? How could someone be so utterly convincing, so devoid of conscience? The gaslighting, which I dismissed as my own insecurity, now stood out in stark relief. Every time I'd questioned a detail, every time I'd expressed a flicker of doubt, he'd turned it around on me. "You're overthinking, Elara. Don't you trust me? Is this what our love has come to?" He'd make me feel guilty for even having a thought that wasn't absolute adoration. He'd make me apologize for my paranoia, for my lack of faith. And I, desperate to believe in the beautiful dream he'd woven, would always fall back into line, chastising myself for daring to question him. He had systematically dismantled my confidence, eroded my intuition, and made me doubt my own sanity, all while living a double life. It was a psychological masterpiece of manipulation, and I had been his unwitting canvas. The anger, cold and sharp before, now began to simmer, a dangerous heat in my veins. This wasn't just about me. This was about Chloe too, the other Chloe, his wife, who was also a victim of his elaborate charade. And perhaps even more horrifyingly, there were others. How many women had he strung along? How many lives had he entangled in his web of lies? The thought of his wife, Chloe, spurred me into action. I had to know more. I couldn't just sit here, drowning in my own despair. I went back to the laptop, my fingers moving with a newfound resolve. The email invitation had a link to an online photo album. I clicked it, my breath catching in my throat. Dozens, hundreds of photos. Chloe and Julian on vacations, at family gatherings, celebrating holidays. Photos of them with 2 children, a boy and a girl, both with Julian's distinctive smile. His children. Not just a wife, but a family. A complete, fully formed life that he had meticulously hidden from me. The sheer audacity of it was staggering. He had talked about wanting children with me, about building a family in that future home. All while he already had one. The depth of his depravity was unfathomable. I scrolled through the photos, a morbid fascination taking hold. There was one of Chloe, Julian, and the children at a beach, the same beach he'd told me he was visiting for a solo business retreat just a few months ago. He'd even sent me a photo of the sunset from there, a beautiful, solitary scene. Now I knew he hadn't been alone. He'd been with his family. My phone buzzed, startling me. It was Liam. I stared at the screen, then back at the photos of Julian's secret family. My hand trembled as I answered. "Hey," I managed, my voice a thin, reedy whisper. "Elara? You sound weird. Everything okay?" Liam's voice was laced with concern. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "No, Liam. Nothing is okay. I need you to come over. Now. I've found something." There was a pause, then Liam's calm, reassuring voice. "I'm on my way. Don't move. Just breathe." His words were a lifeline in the churning ocean of my despair. I knew, as I hung up, that the unraveling had truly begun. The secret was out, at least to me, and soon, to Liam. The quiet, insidious worm of doubt had finally burst forth, a venomous snake, exposing the rotten core of the man I had loved. The future home blueprint lay forgotten, a cruel reminder of a future that would never be, built on a foundation of lies. The champagne, still chilling, would remain unopened. This was not a celebration, it was the beginning of a war. And I, for the first time in a long time, felt a flicker of something other than pain, a cold, hard resolve. The next few hours were a blur of raw emotion and grim determination. Liam arrived, his face etched with concern, and I, without preamble, shoved the laptop in front of him. He scrolled through the photos, his jaw tightening with each image, his initial skepticism giving way to shock, then to a quiet, simmering rage that mirrored my own. "Elara," he said, his voice low and strained, I don't even know what to say. This is monstrous." His validation, though painful, was a balm. I hadn't imagined it. I wasn't crazy. Julian was the monster. We spent hours dissecting every lie. Every vague excuse, every suspicious detail that I had, in my blind love, dismissed. Liam, with his sharp, logical mind, helped me connect the dots, pointing out patterns of deception I hadn't fully grasped. Remember that time he lost his phone at the airport and had to get a new one, and all his contacts were gone? Liam mused, a grim look on his face. He probably had a separate phone for his other life. Or maybe he just needed an excuse to wipe it clean. The thought sent another shiver down my spine. The layers of his deception were terrifyingly deep. The conversation shifted from shock to strategy. "What are you going to do?" Liam asked, his gaze steady. "You can't just let him get away with this." The word revenge hung in the air, but it wasn't about petty retaliation. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming my narrative, my dignity, and ensuring he couldn't do this to anyone else. "I'm going to expose him," I said, the words firm, surprising even myself. "Not just for me, but for her. For his wife. For everyone he's manipulated." Liam nodded, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "Good. But we need a plan. He's a master manipulator. He'll try to gaslight you again, try to twist everything." He was right. I couldn't just confront him blindly. I needed proof, undeniable, irrefutable proof that would stand up against his lies. The email and the photo album were a good start, but I needed more. I needed to document everything. We started gathering evidence. I went through my phone, looking for old texts, call logs, anything that could corroborate his absences or inconsistencies. Liam suggested checking his social media, if he had any, or any public records. Julian was notoriously private online, with only a LinkedIn profile that was impeccably professional and gave no hint of a personal life. But Liam, with his tech savvy, started digging. He found an old, dormant Facebook profile under a slightly different name, one that Julian might have used years ago. It was locked down, but a few public photos were visible, and they confirmed our worst fears. More photos of Chloe, the children, and Julian, looking every inch the devoted family man. The dates on these photos stretched back years, long before Julian and I had even met. This wasn't a recent affair, this was a lifelong pattern of deception. He had built his entire life on a foundation of lies, juggling two separate realities with chilling precision. The sheer scale of his deceit was breathtaking. The financial entanglement was the next chilling discovery. Julian had convinced me to invest a significant portion of my savings into a joint venture, a promising tech startup he claimed to be funding. He'd shown me impressive projections, confident pitches, and made it sound like a foolproof investment in our future. Now, I pulled up the financial statements. The money had indeed been transferred, but not to a joint account. It had gone into an account solely in his name, an account I had no access to. And the startup? A quick search revealed no such company registered. It was a phantom, a sophisticated scam designed to siphon off my funds. My blood ran cold. He hadn't just stolen my heart, he had stolen my financial security. The betrayal was deeper, more insidious than I could have imagined. This wasn't just about a broken heart, it was about a shattered life, a future jeopardized. The anger solidified into a cold, hard resolve. He wouldn't get away with this. Liam, seeing the depth of my despair and rage, suggested we consult a lawyer. "This isn't just a breakup, Alara. This is fraud. This is emotional abuse. You need professional help." The idea was daunting, but necessary. I couldn't fight this battle alone. The thought of confronting Julian, of seeing his charming facade crumble, of facing his inevitable gaslighting, filled me with a mixture of dread and grim satisfaction. I wanted to see him squirm. I wanted him to feel a fraction of the pain he had inflicted on me. But more than that, I wanted justice. I wanted to ensure that his carefully constructed world of lies came crashing down around him, publicly and irrevocably. The story of his deception deserved to be told. Not whispered in hushed tones, but shouted from the rooftops. And I, the woman he had tried to silence and diminish, would be the one to tell it. The future home blueprint lay discarded on the island, its promise now a bitter memory. But a new blueprint was forming in my mind, one for a future I would build on truth, strength, and unwavering resolve. This was no longer just about me, it was about reclaiming power from a man who had wielded it with such cruel indifference. The days that followed were a grueling exercise in emotional control. Julian was still out of town, his sporadic calls filled with the usual affectionate platitudes, each one now a fresh stab to my gut. "Missing you, Angel," he'd coo, and I'd force a neutral response, my voice carefully devoid of the rage simmering beneath the surface. I spent every waking moment meticulously documenting his lies, cross-referencing dates, saving screenshots, building an irrefutable case. Liam, ever the steadfast friend, helped me organize the evidence, creating a timeline of his deceptions. We even found a public marriage record for Julian Miller and Chloe Peterson in a county 3 states away, dated almost a decade ago. The sheer audacity of it, the longevity of his double life, was mind-boggling. He wasn't just a cheat, he was a professional deceiver, a con artist of the heart. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies, listened patiently, her expression unreadable, as Liam and I laid out the meticulously compiled evidence. When we finished, she leaned back, a slight frown on her face. "This is extensive," she said, her voice dry. "And quite frankly, appalling. You have a very strong case for fraud and emotional distress, Ms. Hayes. Possibly even bigamy, depending on the jurisdiction and his intent." Bigamy. The word hung in the air, heavy and chilling. It wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was a criminal offense. The implications were staggering. "What's our next step?" I asked, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "We need to serve him," Ms. Davies stated. "And we need to do it in a way that he can't deny or escape. A public setting would be ideal, if you're up for it. It often prevents them from trying to spin a counter-narrative." A public setting. The words resonated with a grim satisfaction. This was it. The public humiliation I had envisioned, not for me, but for him. The opportunity presented itself sooner than expected. Julian called, his voice bubbling with excitement. "Angel, I have amazing news. My big deal closed. We're celebrating with a huge company dinner this Friday. I want you there, front and center. My colleagues have been dying to meet you." My stomach churned. A company dinner. His colleagues. The very people he had kept me at arm's length from. It was too perfect. He was planning something, I was sure of it. He wanted to parade me around, perhaps to solidify his image as the successful, devoted partner, or worse, to stage a public breakup that would make me look like the unstable one. But this time I would be ready. "That sounds wonderful, Julian," I said, forcing a lightness into my voice I didn't feel. I wouldn't miss it for the world. I could almost hear his smug smile through the phone. He had no idea what was coming. The next few days were a blur of nervous anticipation. Liam and I refined the plan with Ms. Davies. We decided on a subtle, yet devastating, reveal. I would arrive at the dinner, seemingly oblivious, and let Julian play out his charade for a while. Then, at the opportune moment, I would drop the bomb. Ms. Davies prepared a formal letter, outlining the fraud and the intent to pursue legal action, along with a copy of the marriage certificate and some of the more damning photos. Liam, meanwhile, set up a discreet live stream on a burner social media account, linked to a projector he would subtly set up in the venue. The plan was audacious, risky, but potentially devastatingly effective. The thought of Julian's face, stripped bare of its charming facade, filled me with a perverse sense of justice. He had built his life on a carefully constructed narrative. Now, I would dismantle it, piece by agonizing piece. in front of the very people whose respect he craved. Friday arrived, a day that felt both impossibly slow and terrifyingly fast. I dressed meticulously, choosing a sleek, understated black dress that exuded quiet confidence, not a hint of the turmoil raging inside me. I wanted to look strong, composed, utterly in control. Liam met me outside the upscale restaurant, his eyes reflecting a mixture of apprehension and grim resolve. "You ready for this?" he asked, his hand briefly squeezing my arm. I took a deep breath. "As I'll ever be." Inside, the restaurant buzzed with a sophisticated hum. Julian, looking impossibly handsome in a tailored suit, spotted me immediately, his face lighting up with a practiced, dazzling smile. He strode towards me, his arms open, and pulled me into a hug that felt utterly hollow. "Elara, my love. You look stunning." He kissed my forehead, a gesture that once made my heart flutter, now made my skin crawl. He led me to a large, round table, introducing me to his colleagues with a flourish. "Everyone, this is Elara, the woman who makes my world go round." The words, once sweet, now tasted like ash. I smiled politely, shaking hands, making small talk, playing the part of the doting girlfriend. All the while, my heart hammered against my ribs, and my eyes scanned the room, looking for Liam, for the projector, for the moment. The dinner progressed, a torturous charade of polite conversation and forced smiles. Julian was in his element, regaling his colleagues with anecdotes, making grand pronouncements about future deals, occasionally squeezing my hand under the table, a possessive gesture that made my stomach churn. I watched him, truly watched him, for the first time without the filter of love. His eyes, once so captivating, now seemed cold and calculating. His laugh, once so infectious, now sounded hollow. He was a performer, and I had been his most devoted audience. As the main course was cleared and dessert menus were distributed, Julian tapped his glass with a spoon, signaling for attention. "If I could have everyone's attention for a moment," he began, his voice booming with confidence, "I have a very special announcement to make." My heart leaped into my throat. This was it. His grand performance. I subtly glanced at Liam, who was seated at a nearby table, seemingly engrossed in his phone. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Julian continued, his gaze sweeping across the room, lingering on me for a fraction of a second. "As many of you know, Elara and I have been together for some time now, and she's been an incredible source of support and inspiration." He paused, a dramatic beat, and then, his voice softening, he turned to me. "Elara, my darling, you know how much I cherish you. And I've been doing a lot of thinking lately." My breath hitched. He was going to do it. He was going to break up with me, publicly, in a way that would make me look like the problem, the one who wasn't understanding of his demanding life. I could almost hear the words forming in his mouth. "I just can't give you what you deserve," or "my work requires too much of me." He was setting the stage for a sympathetic exit, leaving me to pick up the pieces of my publicly shattered heart. But he wouldn't get the chance. As he drew a breath to continue, Liam, with a practiced ease, clicked a button on his phone. The lights in the room dimmed slightly, and a projector screen, previously unnoticed, descended silently from the ceiling. A hush fell over the room. Julian, startled, turned, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. And then, the first image flashed onto the screen, a vibrant, smiling woman, arm in arm with Julian. Chloe. His wife. The room collectively gasped. Julian's face went ashen. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The image changed, showing Julian and Chloe with their 2 children, laughing on a beach. Then another, a family Christmas photo, Julian in a festive sweater, surrounded by a large, unfamiliar family. Each image was accompanied by a date stamp, clearly showing they spanned years, long before he had ever met me. The murmurings in the room grew louder, turning into shocked whispers. Julian's colleagues, who had just been listening to his saccharine speech, now stared at the screen, then at him, then at me, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. I rose from my seat, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the rising tide of whispers. Julian was indeed about to make an announcement, I said, addressing the room, my gaze fixed on his terrified, exposed face. He was about to tell you that our relationship, based on a foundation of his lies, was ending. What he neglected to mention, however, is that he's been married for 10 years, has 2 children, and has been living a complete double life while stringing me along. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Julian tried to stammer something, to reach for the projector, but Liam, ever vigilant, quickly disabled the remote. These, I continued, gesturing to the images on the screen, are photos of his actual family. His wife, Chloe Miller, whose 40th birthday he recently attended, while telling me he was on a critical business trip. The word Chloe seemed to hang in the air, a cruel echo of his deception. Then, Liam projected the scanned copy of the marriage certificate onto the screen, the official seal and dates undeniable. And this, I stated, my voice gaining strength, is their marriage certificate. Dated 9 years ago. Long before he ever met me. Long before he convinced me to invest my life savings into a non-existent company, a fraudulent scheme he called our future. The mention of fraud galvanized the room. People began to openly whisper, some pulling out their phones, no doubt searching for information. Julian, his face a mask of pure terror, finally found his voice. Ilara, stop. This is insane. She's delusional. She's making this up, he yelled, his voice cracking, his charming facade completely shattered. He lunged towards me, but Liam stepped in front of him, blocking his path. Delusional? I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Or perhaps just tired of being gaslit, Julian? Tired of being told my intuition was paranoia while you systematically stole my time, my trust, and my money? I reached into my bag and pulled out the legal document Ms. Davies had prepared. This, Julian, I said, holding it up for everyone to see, is a formal notice of intent to sue for fraud, emotional distress, and bigamy. My lawyer will be in touch. I placed the document gently on the table in front of him, a stark white rectangle against the pristine tablecloth. The room was silent, save for the frantic clicking of phones and the occasional choked gasp. Julian stood there, utterly exposed, his carefully constructed world collapsing around him in a public, humiliating spectacle. His colleagues, who had just been laughing at his jokes, now looked at him with disgust and disbelief. The man who had once commanded respect and admiration was now a pariah, his reputation irrevocably destroyed. I looked at him, truly looked at him, and for the first time I felt nothing but a profound sense of emptiness, devoid of love, anger, or even pity. He was just a hollow shell, a master of illusion caught in his own trap. Enjoy your dessert, Julian, I said, my voice calm, almost detached. You've certainly earned it. With that, I turned, and with Liam by my side, walked out of the restaurant, leaving behind the stunned silence and the wreckage of Julian Miller's carefully constructed life. The night air felt cool and clean on my face, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere of deceit I had just escaped. It was over. The public humiliation, the betrayal, the lies, it had all culminated in this moment. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt a fragile, tentative sense of freedom. The future home, once a symbol of his betrayal, now felt like a blank canvas, waiting for me to paint a new, authentic life upon it. The moment we stepped out of the restaurant, my phone exploded. Texts, calls, social media notifications. The story, fueled by Liam's discreet live stream and the sheer audacity of the public reveal, had gone viral. News outlets were already picking it up, the headlines screaming about local entrepreneurs' double life exposed. My face, though blurred in most of the photos, was everywhere. Julian's, however, was crystal clear, his shocked, terrified expression immortalized online. The initial wave of relief was quickly followed by a dizzying sense of overwhelm. My private pain was now public spectacle. But beneath the anxiety, there was a strange, empowering sense of vindication. He couldn't hide anymore. His lies were out in the open, for everyone to see. Liam, ever the pragmatist, immediately took control. "We need to get you somewhere safe, Alara. Away from the cameras, away from the inevitable media circus." He drove me to his apartment, a quiet sanctuary away from the chaos. My phone continued to buzz, a relentless symphony of public outrage and support. Friends, family, even distant acquaintances, reached out, their messages a mix of shock, sympathy, and admiration for my courage. My parents, who had adored Julian, were heartbroken and furious, but their unwavering support was a lifeline. "We always knew something was off, honey," my mom confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "But he was so convincing. We're so sorry." Their words, though painful, were a comfort. I hadn't been completely alone in my suspicions. The next few days were a whirlwind of legal consultations, media requests, all politely declined by Ms. Davies, and emotional processing. Ms. Davies wasted no time. The lawsuit was filed, and the financial investigation began in earnest. It turned out Julian had not only defrauded me but several other individuals and even some small businesses through similar investment opportunities. He was a serial con artist, his charming facade a carefully constructed tool for exploitation. The police were also involved, launching an investigation into the bigamy and fraud charges. His carefully built empire was crumbling, brick by painstaking brick. One afternoon, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. "Alara? This is Chloe Miller." My breath hitched. His wife. The real Chloe. My mind raced, unsure how to react. Was she angry? Accusatory? I saw what happened, she said, her voice surprisingly calm, though tinged with a deep sadness. "I saw the news. I saw the photos. I saw the marriage certificate." There was a long pause. "I'm so sorry, Alara. For everything. I had no idea." Her words were a balm to my wounded soul. She wasn't angry at me. She was a victim too. We talked for hours, two women connected by a shared, devastating betrayal. She revealed her own story of Julian's manipulation, his frequent business trips that were actually his visits to me, his excuses for his emotional distance. She had suspected something was wrong, but like me, he had gaslit her, convinced her she was paranoid, that she was imagining things. We found a strange, painful solidarity in our shared experience, two pieces of a puzzle he had tried to keep separate, now finally united. The financial fallout was more complex than I initially imagined. While Ms. Davies was confident we could recover my stolen funds, it would be a long, arduous legal battle. Julian had cleverly moved assets, hidden funds, and created a labyrinth of shell companies. It was a testament to his meticulous planning, but also to his utter lack of morality. My professional life also took a hit. The public nature of the scandal, while bringing me support, also brought unwanted scrutiny. Clients asked questions, colleagues offered awkward condolences. I had to take a temporary leave of absence, needing space to heal and disentangle myself from the financial mess he had created. It was a period of immense stress, but I refused to let it break me. I had faced his lies, exposed his truth, and I would fight to reclaim every piece of my life he had tried to steal. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to rebuild. Therapy became a crucial part of my healing process. I learned to identify the patterns of gaslighting, to trust my intuition again, to recognize the subtle red flags I had once ignored. The therapist helped me process the grief, not just for the lost relationship, but for the lost future, the shattered dreams. It was a form of mourning, a painful but necessary journey towards acceptance. Liam remained my rock, his quiet support and unwavering belief in me a constant source of strength. We spent evenings talking, laughing, and sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. He never said "I told you so," though he had every right to. Instead, he simply helped me put one foot in front of the other. Julian, meanwhile, became a pariah. His company disavowed him, his assets were frozen, and he faced multiple lawsuits and criminal charges. The viral story had destroyed his reputation, his career, and his carefully constructed world. He tried to contact me once, a desperate, rambling email filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness, blaming his actions on stress, on a moment of madness. I forwarded it directly to Ms. Davies. There would be no forgiveness, no second chances. He had made his bed, and now he had to lie in it. The satisfaction was not vengeful, but rather a quiet, profound sense of justice. He was finally facing the consequences of his actions. One day, months after the public unraveling, I received a package. It was from Chloe. Inside was a small, beautifully carved wooden bird, a symbol of freedom. A note was attached: "To new beginnings, Alara. Thank you for setting us both free." Her words brought tears to my eyes, but they were tears of gratitude, not sorrow. We had both been trapped in his web, and now, we were both finding our way out. The future home blueprint had long since been discarded, replaced by a vision of a future I would build for myself, on my own terms, with honesty and integrity as its foundation. The pain of the betrayal would always be a part of my story, a scar that reminded me of the battle I had fought and won. But it no longer defined me. I was stronger, wiser, and more resilient than I had ever been. I started a new job, one that aligned more with my values and offered a fresh start. I reconnected with old friends, explored new hobbies, and slowly, cautiously, began to open myself up to the possibility of genuine connection. The experience had taught me invaluable lessons about trust, about self-worth, and about the insidious nature of manipulation. It had also shown me the incredible strength of human resilience, the power of a supportive community, and the quiet dignity of reclaiming one's truth. The world was still full of complexities, of hidden depths and unspoken truths, but now, I faced them with open eyes, armed with the knowledge that I could survive anything. The echo of Julian's lies still lingered sometimes, a faint, distant hum, but it was no longer deafening. It was just a reminder of the silence that once filled a room, a silence I had finally broken, allowing my own voice to rise, clear and strong, into the light. My story was no longer about his betrayal, it was about my triumph.